Today we're going to be talking about imposter syndrome. The reason you have imposter syndrome is simply you really love what you do. That's all it comes down to in a lot of cases. I've got a lot of cases I've seen with friends, with myself even doing with it, even people kind of outside of my circle doing with imposter syndrome. And every single time, it always comes back to the same thing. I notice it's always people who really love what they do and really take it seriously. Not necessarily in a bad way, but in the sense of like, they wouldn't feel right putting something out there unless they really knew it was contributing to the game. And at the end of the day, that's not, you're not really an imposter. It's not that you aren't meant to be doing this. It's actually that you just have a lot higher taste and a lot higher standards for yourself than a lot of other people who you might look at and say, yeah, I can't do something like that, or I can't do something, as maybe poorly thought out as some of the other stuff. You want to be really perfect all the time. And that's great and all, but I honestly think it kind of means you're like taking it a little too serious, right? Like, yeah, you should take this serious, but also at the same time, like, just know, like, every time you look at yourself and you have imposter syndrome and you think, oh, I can't upload this track, like, it's not good enough. Like, there's always going to be somebody else who doesn't necessarily have that standard for better and for worse, right? Like, they might be more willing to put out their track, but at the same time, maybe their quality control isn't always going to be as good. So I think it's a balance, essentially. But it really comes down to that. Like, when you guys are struggling to finish tracks or you're struggling to put stuff out and you think, oh, like, maybe I'm not meant to do this. No, that means you're extra meant to do it. That's the point I'm trying to say here. Is like, if you have that imposter syndrome at all, that already means like, okay, this person really takes this serious and they really care about the craft and about the art they're doing. So it's actually a really great place to start. The only problem is you got to get over it because it's like if you even have that kind of mindset, you already are the type of person who should be doing this. You're not an imposter. Like, you are meant to be doing whatever the thing is that you're trying to do, whether it's producing, singing, whatever. And I know it's easy to let people's voices get in your heads, right? Like, we're all human. I'm human as well. Myself, like, in my journey, I've been working on like singing and kind of like that whole artist stuff, and I've definitely been met with a lot of like, oh, well, why don't you just produce? Oh, okay, yeah, you can do that in the future, but why don't you come produce for us now? A lot of that kind of stuff, and it can definitely put negative voices in your head. I'm saying like my experiences, just so maybe you guys could relate. Like, they definitely put a little voice in my head. Like, every time I want to pick up the mic and start singing, like, oh, well, are you supposed to be a producer or whatever, whatever. I realized at a certain point though that anybody is an artist. Like, if you pick up a mic and you sing, or if you make a beat or you make a song or whatever, like, you are that thing that you think you're an imposter of, right? Like, you are that, and just because you had the inkling to even do it. So yeah, you see what I'm saying here, guys? It just isn't always that serious. Like, I think the imposter syndrome comes from maybe taking things a little too serious, a little too like having to be a little too perfect, and just like, yeah, guys, like, experiment. It's okay if it's not always perfect. Honestly, it's okay if you make some stuff and it kind of starts out bad, or maybe you're working on a new sound and you haven't quite found it yet. That's fine, and it's even cool to put that stuff out. Because at the end of the day, guys, like, we live in the era where anybody can put out music. And if you have an idea and you want to do it, you should just do it. Because eventually, either somebody else is going to do it, or if you have this imposter syndrome and you think, oh, it's not good enough, or I need to be like on this standard, someone else is always going to come along and take that place that you thought you were holding out for. So definitely keep that in mind. And the last point I want to make here, too, is like, great art was not made from a place of like, oh, am I good enough or not? Like, these people who made this classic music that you're essentially trying to get on the level of, they didn't get in the studio thinking like, am I an imposter? Like, is this like, am I meant to be doing this? They got to a sort of flow state where they were just doing it. And maybe, a lot of them didn't have the internet up there in their head kind of giving them this sort of perception of how everything has to be, right? Like, let's say a lot of that classic music was made before the internet, so I do think the internet can make it worse and it can make it easier to get to the imposter syndrome. But at the end of the day, you have to get to a flow state. You have to get to a place where you're not thinking about every single little action you do or about if it's good enough or not. You really have to be like already knowing up here, like, I am that person. And you are that person because you have the inkling to do it and you take it serious and you care. So, like, yeah, basically wrapping this video up, guys. I think imposter syndrome comes from actually probably being more suited to do the thing that you think you're an imposter of, but then you have this whole mental game and you got other people's voices in your head and it comes together in a bad way. So that's me for this one, guys. I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to like this video as well as subscribe. Let me know what you think of this video in the comments. Check out my sounds at the top of the description, electronicsamples.com. The best sounds and electronic music, period. Thanks for the support, everybody, and I'll see you tomorrow with another video.